Okay, so I guess we're ready to start, right? So this roundtable is organized by the Center for Advanced Military Training, and we are very happy to host great speakers. I'm going to introduce them in a second. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Langlois. I'll be the moderator. And I discussed this quotation with several of the speakers there, so I'm going to start with a nice quotation by Ernst Junger, who wrote more than a century ago, in 1920, in Storm of Steel, this famous sentence, and I quote, "Modern warfare distanced the fighter from his enemy, transforming the act of killing into a technical process rather than a personal encounter." Junger, who experienced the brutal intimacy of World War I, foresaw a future where war would no longer be waged in the mud of trench, but through machines that extended reach while reducing exposure. From the industrialized battlefield of his time to today's dronisation of conflict, the trajectory is clear. Technology has not only reshaped warfare, but redefined the very nature of combatants, decision-making, and responsibility. The soldier is now an operator. The battlefield is a feed of data. The enemy is its signature. War is no longer about direct confrontation, but about engagement at a distance, calculated, observed, and executed with precision. This shift raised critical questions that our great speakers are going to tackle. So I'll start with Professor Vincent Bontems. He's a philosopher of science and technology, director of research at CEA, expert in design technology and knowledge management. He's a professor at the University Paris-Saclay and the co-director of one of the leading masters in technology and innovation management in Europe at Paris Sciences et Lettres University. Vincent, I'm very honored to let you speak. And afterwards, I will present the other speakers. Okay?
Okay. Hey. You think let's work with with the microphone. So, je peux utiliser ça? Merci. So I apologize because I'm not as fluent as English as I would like to be, and so I'm going to read the text that I have prepared. I'd like to thank the organizers for their invitation and the trust they've shown in me. It's always a risk to give the floor to a philosopher. Sometimes, once you've heard his or her answer, you've forgotten what your question was about. I'm a philosopher of technology, best known for my commitment to eco-technology. And although I collaborate regularly with Agence d'Innovation de Défense, as an expert in the analysis of technical evolutions and innovation processes, I have worked mainly on scientific instrument lineage. Since I have no specific knowledge of drones, the question is what added value my skill brings to our debates. I see it on two levels. Firstly, by problematizing the meaning that can be given to our subject, the droning of conflicts, and the issues that arise from it, particularly at the ethical level, since this is generally where the philosopher is expected to come in. Secondly, by shedding light on the different analytical grids that may be applied to them. So in the first part, I will address the question why droning constitutes a paradigm shift in warfare. Then in the second, I will look at how the Round Corporation net technical assessment, the Soviet trees, evolution laws, and Japanese science fiction prototyping may help us to characterize the new paradigm. A final word of clarification before we begin. When dealing with a technological subject, there is always a risk of parochialism. is of focusing one's analysis on a small portion of reality and thus missing the general or related dynamics that truly explain the evolutions we observe. Without aiming to be exhaustive in my enumeration of such blind spots, I would therefore add that droning is very likely to call for consideration of the transformations brought about by artificial intelligence, and is also likely to prompt reflection on the cognitive warfare. So, part one. Why droning represents a paradigm shift? When a philosopher has to develop a line of thought in an at least partially unfamiliar field, and droning is certainly more unfamiliar to me than to you, he or she explicitly or implicitly resorts to reasoning by analogy. Analogy is not a relationship of resemblance between two situations, that would be a comparison or assimilation, but the resemblance of relationships within two sometimes totally different domains. So without wasting my time, and yours, trying to justify my choice, I'm going to talk briefly about a paradigm shift that has nothing to do with drones. Gaston Bachelard gives us a precise description of the paradigm shift that takes place between Galilean and Einsteinian relativity theories in La valeur inductive de la relativité. He analyzes the transformation of the algebraic structures in this way. First, purely formal additions that contribute absolutely nothing in terms of quality. Secondly, an algebraic play that takes us from a particular case to a general one. Then, once generality has been conquered, an affirmation that invariance does not work in a world of ghosts, but that almost always, by the consistency and permanence of its form, this invariance indicates matter. Now that I have totally lost you, that this is called defixation in design methodology, let's take a look at the conditions under which droning constitutes a paradigm shift. First, we have to consider the diversity of purely technical additions in terms of power, range, and precision, represented by the use of drones. Given that any technical object can only be understood in relation to its associated environment, this investigation covers both the diversity of technical lineages and current and potential theaters of operation. I am sure that the speaker who will follow me will be able to enlighten us on these points. From an ethical point of view, it seems to me that the rules of engagement and the definition of legitimate targets are the fundamental ethical issues. Secondly, the invariance of this different coupling between drones and their fields of action will produce a general concept of droning, which is a transformation that directly and indirectly affects all military technical lineages. Not only all sorts of current drone will fall under this categorization, but retrospectively, almost all military technologies will appear to be proto-drones. Mines and self-guided sub-torpedoes will from now on seen as ancestors of the gliders. As a provision, I would like to point out that a crucial element of droning is a distance that is established between the human decision and the technical operation. With the introduction of artificial intelligence technologies, this distance raises the issue of the opacity of the operating chain that leads from the human decision, or more generally from legitimate authorization to the activation of the means of destruction. We cannot interpret the actions of a drone in the same way as we interpret those of a human soldier. You have probably all heard of the American general who reproached a drone for rebelling by targeting his troops. This is obviously a problem of alignment, a technical problem to which a solution had to be found. But from an ethical point of view, it still raises a fundamental issue. When a soldier disobeys the rules for a good or bad reason, he's making a transgression. On the other hand, when a deviant behavior emerges in neural networks from deep learning, the highly equipped drone obeys just as much as if it gave satisfaction. Then, thirdly, once the generality of the concept of droning has been conquered, an affirmation that the irreversibility of this transformation does not plunge us into a virtual world, but that almost always, through the consistency and permanence of the new possible operations, droning determines a change in the very meaning of conflicts. This change initially appears as a loss of meaning and takes a negative ethical significance. When drones fight drones, what happens to the sense of the sacrifice? I know that many military leaders would insist on defining war as ultimately a clash of wills. What becomes of the meaning of military engagement when human volition finds itself off-centered, even short-circuited? As for me, I think that the notion of service, which transcends all other values in our military forces and distinguishes them from mercenaries, must retain its meaning. That's why I believe that the inhumanity of conflict in the age of drones raises the question of just war anew. And deserves more than a black matter-style dystopian outlook. I will come back to this in conclusion. Part 2 now. Let's take a look at how various operative design methods shed light on these issues. I will consider 3 of them: the Rand Corporation's NTA, the Soviet theory of inventive problem solving, or TRIZ, and science fiction prototyping as practice in Keio University. I apologize for not covering the French methods. They are as relevant, but in this case, the others offer a convenient triangulation. In each case, I briefly outline their principles, then apply them to droning before trying to draw some lessons about the paradigm shift underway. So, net technical assessment. To define the differentiating assumption of the NTA, I will draw on the report published by the Rand Corporation in 2024, Net Technical Assessment, a methodology for assessing military technology competition. The characteristic of this method is indeed, firstly, that it is purely competitive. Secondly, that it aims to guarantee the asymmetry of attack and defense. And thirdly, that it is scenario dependent. I won't comment on the geopolitical implication of the claim that there are only competitors, no allies, no partners, but merely observe that this position of principle deliberately departs from the technological development optimum of competition. That is to say, situation of rivalry where competitors are nevertheless forced to pool a certain number of resources to ensure their collective security against systemic risk, to prevent the entry of new players, or simply to mutualize efforts. As for the second, we have to recognize its validity. There is no point in being the best in a field. You have to compare the resources thus obtained with those of opposing technological potentials. Antagonist co-evolution is therefore the main subject of NTA, with the difficulty which must nevertheless be noted that we don't always know which means will be opposed. This rather close character of the method, which aims to be highest efficiency in conflicts where the adversary is well defined, is a key factor in the success of NTA, and is further reinforced by the fact that the evolution of the technology is conditional on its involvement in a scenario. As with most adversarial methods, it will be about anticipating tactical moves, predictable measure versus predictable countermeasure, and therefore asking what is the next move, or more precisely, what is the preceding move that prevents the opponent from reacting. This method therefore emphasizes the asymmetries between attack and defense. This means guaranteeing relative dominance by ensuring that the ratio between performance, power, range, precision, and production cost is always higher than that of the adversary. The whole range of UAVs needs to be considered in terms of their potential application in the air, at sea, on land, under the sea, and in space. And I suppose drones in screamers underground remains the stuff of science fiction. At the same time, all types of defense should be considered, from camouflage and hacking to armor, decoys, jamming, and interception. Given the wide range of production costs and possible uses, the combinatorial possibilities are immense, which is why the method proceeds by funneling in an adversary. In the report, the case study concerns quantum technologies, and the designated adversary is China. To develop a scenario in which the number of favorable asymmetries to be obtained is limited. The risk, of course, is not to anticipate the emergence of other adversaries and/or conflicts in which the adversaries assume their asymmetry. This method is also problematic with droning, since droning has symmetrized the conflict in Ukraine, at least at the beginning, and is precisely creating the opportunity for new players to enter the game. However, we shouldn't take Rand's experts for naive. The goal is to be universally dominant, and the anticipated paradigm shift underlying droning is that of transforming war into hunting. I'm not being original here, since this point has already been documented and popularized for the general public in France, La théorie du drone, and the USA, Good Kill, each time raising the ethical devaluation of military operators. Nonetheless, it allows us to speculate on the next preempting move. Absolute domination would be achieved if a vast system of satellites were able to identify and locate in all time all potential targets of an armada of drones and floating bombs piloted by human agents themselves immersed in a metaverse. That is to say, a virtual environment where they don't know whether they are evolving in a simulation or in the reality. If interpreted in a paranoid way, investment in Starlink, Neuralink, and Stargate gain in relevance and coherence with this type of hunting scenario. So, j'ai encore le temps de faire la suite? Sure. Now, take a look on the other side, to the Soviet trees method. It is widely used in Asia. Samsung trains all its engineers in this way, but I have no idea whether this is a method used in the Russian secret science pyramid. I'll be relying here on the translated works of Genrich Altschuler and on the skills I have developed through my cooperation with French trees experts, in particular Jérôme Lafourcade. Trees is based on the principle that in order to achieve their ideal function, technical lineages evolve by encountering contradictions, physical, technical, or in their coupling with the macrosystem, and that once the main contradiction has been identified and overcome, they move closer to ideality. In so doing, they obey a number of evolutionary laws. The law of the uneven development of the system is the one I will be focusing on in order to understand droning, because it enables us to anticipate the evolution of a system according to its current phase of evolution, takeoff, growth, saturation, or decline. Assuming that the ideal function of all military systems is to destroy without being destroyed, it is clear that droning represents the resolution of the main contradiction, how to get close enough to the target to destroy it without exposing yourself to destruction. This contradiction can be overcome in many ways: stealth, hyperspeed, protection, or simply ignored if being destroyed is no longer an issue. Droning combines all of them. Assuming that drones are in a growth phase, we can deduce that they adapt to the environment, to their operations, and also that they mobilize more and more material, energetic, and informational resources through a network that we will refer to as their macrosystem. The law of uneven development then predicts the order in which the various parts of the system will be improved. First, the effector, then the power and transmission devices, and finally the control device. Indeed, we have observed a race to improve the yield of the effector with a rapid diversification of fields of application, then a competition over energetic autonomy to improve the range, and finally through an integration of informational functions. This last evolution has merged with the implementation of RA, and the law predicts that it will take place in two stages, first for spatial functions, then for decision-making functions. This last transformation is at the heart of the ethical discussion of the French efforts to change the rules of war so that the decision to kill is always taken by the human agent. One last point needs to be made clear from the tree's point of view. When a technology enters a growth phase, it usually condemns a saturated technology to decline, leaving it with no choice but to align itself with a new technology or reduce itself to a niche technology. Have tanks, the emblem of 20th century conflicts, become woolly mammoths in the face of hunting drones. Since the cost of what can destroy tanks, planes, or ships is much lower than theirs, disruption seems likely. However, a challenger who cannot take the lead in drones or in all sorts of drones is not without options. Trees points to the coupling of new technologies with their macro system. If you can take control of the opponent's networks or prevent it from functioning, if you can cut off the power supply needed for production, if you can provide a sufficient deterrence, it is possible to neutralize the opponent's domination and regain the advantage with more rudimentary technologies. Je termine? Okay, that's perfect. With this in mind, the strategy employed will be to have a big production of low-cost drones and a short segment of very high-tech segment. I will finish by just stating the conclusion of what I would have said about science fiction prototyping. The main problem is that if you are in a war of only drones in a sort of inhuman conflicts, there is a loss of meaning about the military, of the military commitment. And then I will not go into a speculation in the Black Mirror style, dystopian things, where there is a private armies of drones rain terror around the Earth. I will choose to take my hat of eco-technology philosopher again and go in the Ministry of Future of Kim Stanley Robinson, where you have swarm missiles which are unstoppable, and they bring a sudden halt in the conflict. But military functions keep a significance, the sense of service. And so in this novel, all the military forces are cooperating to enforce the international law and to prevent deviant human behaviors to sabotage the effort to fight against climate change, a threat that threats the whole of humanity. The last word is for Herodotus. Herodotus has written in his inquiry, from what I know, it's the oldest method of conception that we have in Europe, in our Occidental tradition. I quote, "The Persians always deliberate twice." So the Persians, what's the translator? The Persians always deliberate twice. They are in the habit of deciding the most important things when they are drunk. Decisions taken in this state are submitted to them the next day, when they have regained their lucidity. If sober, they still adopt them, they implement them. If not, they reject them. After the inebriation of philosophical speculation, it is time to listen to more sober words of those with real knowledge and feedbacks on the subject of droning. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Bontems. So now we have the presentation of Gérard Lapierre, military engineer, serving General Directorate of Armament for more than 30 years in various positions. He's currently in charge of the strategic anticipation units in support of the future preparation process. Colonel, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you. Good afternoon. Yeah, my speech will be about the drone warfare revolution, and in particular the rise of swarm drones, and trying to convince you about, or to make you aware at least about this military revolution in progress. It's obvious the drone warfare revolution is transforming our conflicts. Once limited to reconnaissance, drones can now strike, spy, and even operate in autonomous swarms. And this shift raises many tactical, strategic, and ethical challenges. So to structure a bit my speech, I will just go through three main parts. The first one, the rise of military drones. The second part about some explanation, why such a success. And to conclude with some challenges and a bit of strategic foresight of what the drones, the use of drones would stand for. So in terms of military drones, I will start with that, just a recall of history. I was really surprised by the fact that we can find the first use of drone during not the Second World War, but the first one. Just remember that Clemenceau in 1917 or 18 launched a kind of innovation contest already on drones. And we got one captain from the army, Captain Boucher, and an engineer Percheron, who managed to have an aircraft or a drone without a drone or an aircraft without pilot flown during more than 100 kilometers. Of course, if you look at the books, you can see many reported use of drones during the Cold War or the Gulf War, but really, I think that the use really starts with the beginning of our century. Of course, with the expansion of all the armed US drones, you all know the Predator, the Reaper, and this explains the fact that we use such a platform to do our intervention is also in line or echoes with the strategic environment at that time, which is that, in fact, we didn't want any casualties, and the best way to do so was to launch remotely a drone. But when you look at the last 5-6 years, we really can see a game changer in the use of drones. And I would like just to focus on that. And I would say on the two sides of the conflict, symmetric or not. If you look at, or if you remember the intervention in Libya, what you can see in 2019, there was a massive use of tactical drones. So the new thing was that in a conflict, one or the two sides use tactical drones. Before it was, as I said, drone more for ISR uses like the Reaper or the Predator. And here appears the Turkish drone TB2, you may know that, versus the use of MAL. What is interesting to note in Libya is that considering that the air defense protection and the electronic warfare was quite low, in fact, it was possible for the male drone to target and to prevent the tactical drones from taking off. And in that sense, during this first phase of the conflict, those who got the male drones got the advantage. And what happened? But the other side started to launch their tactical drones from unforeseen tracks, using them as radio relay. And what happened is that with the massive use of this tactical drone, they managed to turn the advantage for them and get back to the advantage for the tactical drone. So it was an interesting aspect. 1 year after, in Syria, with the Spring Shield operation, still with Turkish drones, continuing targeting and killing soldiers, helicopters, tanks, aircraft, it was still possible to use ISR and targeting because of, again, this absence of efficient air defense protection. A bit after, with the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan in this area of Haut-Karabakh, in top of the use of the Turkish drone TB2, we can see the first use reported of what we call in French les munitions rôdeuses, loitering munition, or the remotely operated munition, such as the Arab 2 and the Orbiter 1K. Again, this extensive use of tactical drone has been made possible because of the low air defense in place and the ability to identify and destroy targets in that sense, plus the psychological impact on the population to have them scared about the dominance of these tactical drones. Last but not least, I could have talked about the Ukrainian conflict, but I will let this part to my colleagues just after. So basically, at this point, just to make you aware that, as you can see, drone warfare is really widespread, used by nations, militias, and even, of course, terrorist groups. So everybody can use this type of assets. And this is the first takeaway I would like you to take from this speech, is that with the drones, you got a low entry gate, meaning that you don't have a competitive advantage compared to the other side with the drones, with the use of drones, and I will come back to that point in the conclusion. So drones, military drones. What kind of drones can we consider? As I said, the first use was the ISR purposes, from the AIL segment, mail segment, even at tactical level for surveillance and intelligence. In Europe, you are all aware about the Euromal, Eurodrone program launched with Italy, Spain, and Germany. And you may have seen in the news also the support from the Ministry of Armed Forces, the French Ministry of Armed Forces, about this company Turgis et Gaillard to develop, let's say, a low-cost or low-cost MAL. There is also the first-person view drone segment for all missions related, all cases related to fire support and targeting. The combat drones, should it be to launch a missile, for example, in the Eurodrone, we intend to have the Acheron LP. You may also know the Hellfire, but the drone can itself be the missile. And again, I come back to the kamikaze segment, and all we can see with this differentiation between loitering, munitions rôdeuses, where the drone will fly in a zone waiting for action for type of target. The remotely operated drone, more obvious, still with the control and the human operator through line of sight, so short range control for the remotely operated drone, but also the deep strike drone, where they are able to navigate through the use of GNSS signal. Of course, I talk a lot about the aeronautical domain, but there are plenty of drones in the naval and underwater field with the drones, and again, the use of drones in swarm with this concept. So this is the end of my first part, just to give a rapid overview about the drones. So now the second element, why it stands for a real strategic and tactical game changer for all of us. Tactical advantage because it is cost effective. The use of drones are cheaper than a fighter. You may remember why we took so much time to decide to launch the Eurodrone, and before to buy or to procure Reaper from the US Air Force. Because in the Air Force there was a kind of a dispute about the threats given by the drones compared to the conventional way of doing air operation. Tactical advantage because, of course, it reduces, in theory, human casualties, at least from the side who use it. We limit the soldier exposure to risk, and this is, I guess, one of the main reasons why we use such kind of platform in the 90s and beginning of this century, because the population were not ready to have casualties. Mobility and autonomy, of course. The drones can operate over large distance, and you get rid of the limitation of the human being in operation. And maybe the last element, it is low tech, but low tech in the sense of mass deployment capability. The new element, I guess, if I would have had to do this brief 1 year ago or 2 years ago, maybe I would not have mentioned this point. Here there is this dimension of quantity more than quality. So let's focus on this aspect, the mass product solution. So it is a technology accessible to many. You know that. You can and our competitors are used to developing drones considering cheap element. If you look at the Iranian fleet of drones, they use this development cycle of launch a Shahed version X, Y, or Z, see the impact, modify, retro-engineering, and have the new version or the new generation of this type of drones. It's very, very interesting to see this let's say innovation, how innovation is taken on board in that respect. Many groups use also simple commercial available drones. When you have a drone from a commercial company able to do logistics, but in fact, it's the last mile to have a military drone able to carry a payload for any military mission is not so big. So the aspect of time readiness versus over technology is really a game changer in that respect in the moment we are all living right now. Mass production as decisive factor. Mass production because your drone is low cost, and because you will be able to produce on the battlefield this effect of saturation. Saturation is very important. I talk about the air defense. When your opponent has a limited or not efficient air defense, of course you will be able to penetrate more easily. But in fact, with using a lot of drones, you may saturate the air defense system of your adversary, or to deviate or to open the way for further action. You may have seen also this. So this mass production of kamikaze drones are heavily used in Ukraine or Russia. You saw what happened 2 days ago in Moscow. We have, of course, the use of drones in militias and non-state groups, ISIS, Hezbollah, or even the Houthi. I can recall also, of course, the drones destroyed by the French frigate Languedoc in the 2023 or 24 with the Astor family. And of course, in the future conflicts, we can imagine a very interesting use. If you look at what we are already able to do in fireworks ceremony with the drones, if this coordination or synchronization is used for military purposes, I let you imagine the type of effect we could have. See, I will. So just to focus on the rise of swarm drones, the new era. because I talk a lot about the platform, so now let's talk about the coordination of many platforms, or the swarming effect, and the fact that they will be able to coordinate and adapt in real time. Communication will be key. Artificial intelligence will be key. And this, again, this coordinated use will allow the conduct of operation to overwhelm enemy defense and air defense in particular. Just to mention that NATO is preparing an exercise in the Baltic this summer to test various concepts of swarm drones, not only in the aeronautical domain, but of course in the maritime one. So last part, I still have a bit of time, so about the challenges and a bit of strategic foresight in that respect. 4 minutes. Oui. Strategic impact of the swarm drones, so as I said, mass destruction capability, growing automation, and the democratization of the access to technology. Some ethical and legal concerns. I will not come back to what Vincent mentioned. Just about accountability. Really, the point is being able to address who is responsible in case of error, in case of unjustified attacks. Will we face future conflicts without human in the loop? A combat between AI-driven drones without human in the battlefield? Will it be possible? And of course, the terrorist use of drone swarms. One point I did not address so far is the countermeasure. Countermeasure, very, very important aspect. I talk a lot about the evolution of drones, their impact on the battlefield, and with that, there is also all the countermeasure. GPS jamming and cybersecurity is one aspect. So we have to invest a lot in electronic warfare to disable drone use. You may remember what Iran managed to do in 2011, capturing a US Sentinel drone simply by spoofing the GPS signal. I've been said that the attrition of the drones in Ukraine was 70% done by electronic warfare means before anti-missile, showing the importance of this way to countermeasure the use of drones. So one solution is, of course, that the drones will be able in the future to operate without the radio frequency signal. And again, to make the loop, I use many keywords, AI, drones, cybersecurity, and another one is quantic, and quantic may be a solution for that in the future. Again, to consider the massive use of drones, where your ability to destroy the drones on the air will not be enough. One way to overwhelm this massive use of drone will be to attract the drone factory, meaning to have deep strike missile looking at or targeting the critical infrastructure, and the drone factory could be one of these critical infrastructure. Anti-drone weapons and all these things. Just to say that in the French DGA, there is a test area in Biscarrosse, in our test and evaluation center dedicated to missile, where the industry can test and continue to develop all this anti-drone warfare technique. So as a conclusion, what do we have to anticipate, ladies and gentlemen? I hope that I manage to demonstrate how the drones are currently revolutionizing warfare, that the rise of swarm drones and low-cost UAV would be a strategic game changer. Drones and artificial intelligence will be certainly two main game changers in our way to conduct operation in the future, separately and most importantly combined. We have some issues to address. What is the best mix between highly sophisticated drones on the one hand and low-tech drones on the other hand? Where to operate them? How to protect our more expensive assets? What attrition do we accept for them? Again, all these elements participate in elaborating what we call the strategic dilemma, where to put efforts, and introduce this matter of uncertainty for all the actors involved in any conflict. I will stop here just to say, well, not underestimate also the anti-drone warfare aspect and our capacity to operate in jam environment. And I guess I will stop there.
Sure.
Voilà.
Thank you.
Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. So we're now going to have the presentation of two majors from the Center for Advanced Military Training, Major Mira first, and then Major Kasharovsky. They're both in the military and have extensive operational experience. They're currently at the Army War College, and they're going to give very important viewpoint on what is happening right now on the field. Thank you so much for your intervention.
Thank you very much, sir. So, good morning. I would like to share with you what I saw and heard during my last mission, 6 months at SAGU, Security Assistance Group for Ukraine, and at ENSA2, NATO Security Assistance and Training for Ukraine, respectively in US and NATO mission, responsible for coordinating international aid to Ukraine, but also my thoughts on the subject. In particular, I was lucky enough to follow several lessons learned, conferences conducted by the Ukrainians, and work with them on the use of drones on the battlefield. I won't talk about the conflict between Israel and Palestine for two main reasons. First of all, I think I know as much about it as you do. And secondly, I think that it's a really interesting conflict in terms of ethics and planning processes, but not in terms of drones, which uses after quite classic in terms of targeting. First, I define a drone as any unmanned vehicle with no restrictions on the environment in which it can be used. In fact, this term for me also includes robots. My plan will be in 3 parts. The first will focus on the killer drones already in use. The second will tackle the major development underway in Ukraine. And the last, a few points for reflection, just fun for thought. Firstly, don't think of killer robots as Terminator, Robocop, or science fiction robots. This kind of machine should not exist in the medium to long term, for sure. However, killer robots have been a reality for several years, especially in democratic countries. In fact, the first drone strike was carried out by the United States in the early 2000s. In 2004, the US developed also and used a ground-based drone capable of firing. And today, South Africa defends its northern border with killer robots, made by a famous company, Samsung. It is therefore interesting to note, firstly, that these killer drones have been used for a long time, and secondly, that being a democratic country is not an argument for refusing their development. However, All these drones are temporarily controlled by humans. In other words, they cannot open fire on their own initiative. Although this term is, I think, inappropriate for robots, since it would mean that a drone has free will. I think it's better to say that their programming does not allow them to open fire without human interventions. Moreover, today, their scope of employment is limited to the tactical entity level and the execution of a specific mission. One of the lessons learned from the Ukraine and Russia conflict is the paradigm shift in their use. Today, all environments are concerned, even if land domain is less conducive to the use of ground-based drones due to its intrinsic difficulties. For instance, the Ukrainian shores of the Black Sea are areas forbidden for Russia due to the proliferation of naval drones. Furthermore, the exponential capabilities of artificial intelligence are multiplying the capabilities of drones. Today, drone swarms are a reality, and their saturation effect will be, in the future, immeasurable. In fact, imagine tomorrow the effects of each of these drones was if each of these drones was a suicide drone loaded with explosive. So one question, today, are we able to stop a drone swarm? The technology now exists, and the Ukrainians are currently developing the concept of C6 ISR to develop this reality. So I think you know the C4 ISR, command, control, communications, and computers, and the Ukrainians had two more C, cyber, like us, but also a combat system integration, C6 ISR. In addition, the Ukrainians have created a new army, the Unmanned Systems Forces Command, UFSC, alongside the Air Force, the Navy, the Army, with the same prerogatives, operations, human resources, research and development, training, communication, etc., etc. This army, the UFSC, is dedicated to drones, to take into account the intensification of their use, as well as the speed of the innovation countermeasures loop, estimated to be 3 months only. Nowadays, drone-on-drone combat exists, today only between aircraft drones. And they are no longer restricted to tactical use or as support for conventional tools, as aircraft, main battle tank, etc., etc. So now, I would like to address 3 topics, just for reflection. Firstly, to me, the place and context of use of drones needs to be reviewed in the light of our observations of the Ukrainian conflict. In fact, with the existing drone combat, it seems to me that we need to create in our French army drone units at platoon, company, or battalion level, capable of conducting their own combat like the artillery combat. But of course, there is a human resource issue to manage. Secondly, drones are part of a whole. In fact, they are not drones. They are not the be-all and end-all of tomorrow's warfare. Indeed, it would be a mistake to make the effort only on drones or on robots and ignore electronic warfare, radar networks, and solar defense. For example, The Russians send out around 100 Shahed drones every day, and 93% but 93% of which are destroyed by the A2AD, anti-access and area deny systems, thanks to, above all, the radar networks and electronic warfare. Finally, and it's my last point, in my opinion, the definition of the word, the term autonomous, of an lethal autonomous weapon system must be pragmatically reviewed. Autonomous killer drones have been used for a long time, as I already said, but their effect was contained. However, today and tomorrow, artificial intelligence will break through this barrier and is already making the concept of C6ISR possible, as is the autonomous killer robot programmed to open fire, for instance, on facial recognition. But in the future, in an high-intensity war, I think it will be impossible for a human to be responsible for authorizing all the opening of fire. However, humans will remain at the heart of the decision to use drones, since their programming and therefore their safeguards are done by humans. Thus, we must think of the place of man outside of time. Indeed, we have to take temporality out of the decision-making loop and focus the human task above all on the decision upstream. To conclude, I think we should develop all tools without restrictions and trust in our intelligence to use them in the best way, in accordance with the law of conflict. Thank you.
Hello. So first of all, as my co-speaker, I'm just a French guy trying to speak English, so sorry for that, and I will try to be quick. So my personal operational experience encouraged me to be a little bit more careful about the dronification. Of course, drones are effective and unique tools will permanently redefine modern battlefield for four main reasons. First of all, Ukrainian conflict has become the theater of a new kind of war, characterized by, and you know it as much as me, the massive use of drones. The number of drones used by Ukrainian every month is estimated at 100,000 every month. On the other side, Russian forces launches about 12,000 loitering ammunition like Shahed every year. It's estimated that in Ukraine, 75% of the human and material losses are directly or indirectly caused by UAVs. This bottom-up evolution will permanently transform the way war is conducted, as that is obvious. This ubiquity is partly explained by the techno-ops agility and the relatively low cost of dronified warfare, which has been already said, the use of dual civil military technology, but also the absence of normative constraints and direct links between manufacturer and user mainly explains the extraordinary emergence of the use of drones. By nature, battlefield dronisation is multi-domain and covers blind spots by adapting mainly civilian technical advances on the battlefield. In Ukraine, for example, drones are used in a wide variety of missions, including ESA observation, but also used for deliveries or more recently for relay. But they are mainly used in neutralization of targets with one-way attack drones or artillery fire adjustment. The technology is constantly adapting to the needs of the battlefield. The FPV drones, which cost less than 1,000 euros and can carry a load between 1 and 5 kilo, are now equipped with fiber optic, making them resistant to jamming. The modularity of low-tech drone is the key to understand the proliferation. It's also multi-domain. The versatility doesn't stand up to the only tactical domain. Dronified warfare has become essential for both major engagement and guerrilla warfare, from Daesh to NATO. From a tactical point of view, as part of a challenge between the weak and the strong, the proliferation of small drones, tactical drones, provide a pragmatic and effective solution to counter the balance of power at a lower cost. If the detection of these drones is already complex, the interception by surface-based air and missile defense, as Turkine, for example, or by the air police, seems completely disproportionate, making them well adapted to guerrilla action. But, and I want to impact on this point, I think it's a massive impact. One of the minimized or even forgotten consequences of the proliferation of drones concerns the psychological impact. Perfect tool of harassment, UAVs are omnipresent, discreet, and silent. We all know that. They pose a permanent threat over the head of the soldier. In armored vehicles, in covered area, on the sea, and sometimes even in the air, no sanctuary for soldier is available anymore. Embodying the dehumanitation of combat, this machine pose an invisible and continuous threat. I think continuous is the most important word. The sound of the 4 rotors of a DJI kind drone will obviously mark generation of Ukrainian and Russian soldier, and maybe next Occidental soldier. But the impact of dronisation in the strategic domain should not be overlooked either. The incursion of Russian drone into NATO territory in the last few months have been in nature to weaken the cohesion of the allies. The country on the eastern flank on the alliance repeatedly asked secure for stronger protection measures against this overflight. This topic has become a major concern for both NATO strategical and political HQ in Mons and in Brussels. So the balance between cost and efficiency on the dronified warfare largely explain the proliferation of militarized drones and the trivialization of their use in the future. As for me, anachronism and technological surpassing are the main risks that threaten us if we do not think tomorrow's war without considering drone warfare and its complexity. As SNCF recommends, we have to mind the gap. But like any tool, dronified warfare also has constraints and limitations. Of course, shield is improving. The advantage is still with the sword, but the shields are nevertheless perfected. Detection and identification are improved by relying on sensor combination and the development of next-generation sensor, such as Skyfortress, which relies on sonar detection. In Ukraine, the interception rate of drone and missile has been steadily increased from 60% to 93% in recent months. This situation is the result of an increased investment on electronic warfare, which are responsible for 60% of the neutralization, long and medium-range air defense system, but also for the formation of mobile air defense team. And the interception rate of drone only is between 85% and 92%. So the dronisation has also limitation due to the condition of the theater. UAV are extremely sensitive to weather condition. A tactical drone will be, for instance, quite ineffective in the case of a low ceiling. The number of wounded soldiers, it's very interesting, in the Ukraine can triple when the weather conditions are bad on the day. This weather limitation is also true for operative and strategical drones like MQ-9 Reaper. Some version of this drone lack DI syncing, making them unusable in Europe during this certain season. So 11,000 by year for the Russian, 100,000 by month for the Ukraine, but for what purpose? Territorial gains are very limited over the last few months. Maybe they use it for financial reason, maybe because of static Soviet doctrine, because of the price of a missile and the fact that they don't have a lot of them. And maybe because they will keep the conflict under the red line, especially with NATO. So it's a perfect tool for Russians to keep the conflict under the line. So, if the use of drone is necessary, of course, for all the reasons we mentioned, and all the reasons my co-speaker have mentioned, it's not in itself sufficient to win the war. Dronisation must be part of thinking without being the only conclusion. First, to my mind, it's not a game changer. In recent years, the use of the terminology game changer has proliferated at the same rate as the multiplication of conflict. However, this term is not necessarily the most suitable for military strategy. It's defined in economics as a major comparative advantage in the market. In reality, it is a tool for adapting the uncertainty to the black swan, but doesn't make a strategy. Basically, it creates neither imbalance nor rupture. The TB2, even if it was one of the key assets at the beginning of the conflict, has gradually disappeared from the combat zone. Vulnerable to the air defense, not well suited to a positional war, the TB2 has the advantage of its drawbacks. It is slow, large, very visible, and can be easily neutralized. Technology is improving every day, and the entrance ticket to catch up with the progress seems, to the moment, quite high. Betting all our future military and development and investment projects on the dronisation seem quite risky. It's already time to predict the tool to produce the effect of war afterwards, and even more important, the way to use them. So we cannot bet everything on. It would be very risky to think the dronisation will change everything by overriding and even denying the basic of tactical combat. It would be very risky to think about everything through the prism of dronisation. Very risky also to delay the intellectual process of elaborating a long-term military strategy. And very risky to reduce the balance of power to a simple comparison between drone capabilities of each competitor. We have to be careful about the lessons learned from Ukraine conflict. The use of drones is amplified by the fact that maneuver, like I said, has been relegated to the background. Concerns about drone quickly become secondary, again, when the strategic threat is brandished. This was the case in a strategic French headquarters, when Russia launched a few months ago, for the first time in history, an IRBM missile, which is its Oreshnik prototype that can reach target up to 5,500 kilometers away and carrying up to 6 nuclear warheads. So dronisation must be and has to be a leverage effect. If we take a step back on dronisation, we can consider this tool as an asset that multiply effects more than a game changer. Dronisation stands for an additional means in support to the global military strategy. The transparency of the battlefield, which has been very well explained, inducted by the dronisation, requires a return to simplicity and the fundamental of the maneuver. Strategic dilemma, concentration of effort, economy of means, freedom of action must go on being, obviously, at the center of the military strategy. The control of risk and surprise can enable us to reach back maneuver, and for that, drones seem to be the perfect asset. As for me, drone will be mainly used to shape the enemy in order to prepare the main action. Against the enemy, drone will be perfect asset in partition, deception, or deterrence operation, and for the friendly forces, drone will participate to mitigate the lack of critical shore force, or will be concentration dilution efforts. So to conclude, if dronified warfare doesn't enable us to win the war, it can make us lose it. We obviously need to adapt, but not at any cost. It must not be an all-in way, an all-in path towards the development of the tools and tactical doctrine of dronisation. It's a question of thinking about the next move, about tomorrow's war, which will not be, as for me, a drone warfare alone by itself. Although necessary, this bottom-up evolution shake up the way war is conducted without revolutionizing the way it's won. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So the last presentation is for Aurélien Duchesne. To be honest, I had prepared a lot of jokes about Aurélien, but I'm not going to do them because it's a serious subject here. So Aurélien has a lot of titles. Among them, he's a successful writer and an amazing English speaker, as you're going to see in a second. Aurélien, you have 10 minutes, and then we will keep 10 minutes for a question